That was quite the loaded question. What was she really trying to enhance? For starters, her chances of landing a job. She needed anything that would give her an advantage over the competition, especially since ocular displays were becoming increasingly prevalent in tech positions, particularly those off-world. The holographic interface could be projected straight into a user's retina, functioning like a smart screen embedded in the eye. Most individuals opted for a version of nanites akin to medbots to upgrade their vision, though unlike medbots, these were intended to be permanent. Cynthia anticipated that within a decade, this could become a standard requirement in everyday life. It was better to get ahead now than to fall further behind. Cynthia's mind was a whirlwind of confusion as the doctor posed the question. I thought you mentioned that my records didn't include anything about my ocular implant. Wasn't that the reason you asked me about it in the first place? Cynthia inquired, her thoughts aligning like a perfectly executed program. I might have missed it. Can I take a look at it myself? If you don't already have copies of your records, I can send you the details later. But Cynthia had reached her limit. She seized the monitor by one corner and turned it to face her. The screen was cluttered with various tabs and files, but before she could fully absorb the information, her doctor quickly pivoted the monitor back to her own side. Even the briefest nanoseconds paled in comparison to the speed of her eye's camera. The doctor appeared nearly furious. I'm sorry if this conversation has been overwhelming, but that doesn't justify your disrespectful outburst. I must insist that you leave and return when you're in a more composed state. From one Dr. Olivia Havoc, Cynthia read aloud, pausing the image she had captured, zoomed in at the edge of her vision. I'm sending you these additional files to help you prepare for a discussion with my daughter. The doctor flinched, though not with remorse. She's just concerned about you, which is why she contacted me. Oh my God, here we go again, Cynthia exclaimed, rising to leave. Miss Havoc, all she wants is for you to be realistic about this. She rose to her feet, waving her hand as the holographic display of Cynthia's records was instantly replaced by a jumble of gaudy brand logos. I have multiple job opportunities I can guide you through, all of which can be acted upon within the next week. Cynthia turned sharply. She could feel her prosthetic hand straining from her tight grip, but it didn't matter to her. If I had known you were just one of my mom's puppets, I could have avoided all this hassle. Just send me my recommendation. This conversation is over. I'm afraid this conversation is far from finished. I believe our conversation has been concluded for quite some time, essentially from the moment you attempted to turn this assessment into a lecture. However, you will provide me with your signature, confirming that I have successfully passed your oh-so-unique psychological evaluation. If not, I may need to initiate further inquiries with the clinic's management. Specifically, I have questions about how my mother became aware of this appointment, as well as concerns regarding patient policy and the confidentiality between patient and doctor. The doctor's demeanor changed in an instant, his composure shattering. Well, enough. Will you send it to me? Yes or no? Cynthia grinned. It's a simple question. A few days later, Cynthia sat on a park bench, enjoying a well-deserved break after her morning jog, as she reviewed the recommendation letter. The tone of the writer was overly formal, and it was evident that it had been hastily prepared, but it would do the job. She massaged her leg where the muscles ached. It was a strange experience to engage one limb alongside the other, yet only one seemed to benefit from the effort and endure the soreness afterward. Logically, she understood this was reasonable. One of her legs was merely a piece of carbon fiber attached to her residual thigh, but there was a significant disconnect between her rational understanding and her body's instinctive responses. It wasn't precisely a sensation, this lack of pain, rather. It was a perplexing feeling that her body struggled to interpret in a way that felt normal. It wasn't exactly phantom pain, there was no discomfort, but her mind recognized it was sending signals somewhere, waiting for a reply, a reassurance that said, "Don't worry, I've got this, I'll move this way." Cynthia likened it to repeatedly calling someone on the phone, only to be stuck at the dial tone each time. Yet she had grown accustomed to it, much like she was familiar with the ache in her nubs before a storm. However, there were no signs of rain in the park today. It was a warm day with a pleasant breeze, the perfect balance of clouds and blue sky. Nearby, a few children were enjoying the swings, while a couple tossed a frisbee to their dog. Across from Cynthia, an elderly man sat on a bench, contentedly observing the scene as he chatted on his phone. As Cynthia absorbed her surroundings, a holographic notification flickered in her peripheral vision, revealing a new email on her ocular display. It was a follow-up regarding one of her applications. She rummaged through her pockets for her phone, but ultimately opted to view it on her ocular display, despite the starkness of the plain text from her implant. The experience was somewhat uncomfortable, as the interface was originally designed for dual cybernetic eyes, and she wasn't certain she was ready to commit to such a permanent change. In fact, she questioned if she ever would be. She concentrated on the notification for a moment, and the entire email unfolded before her. "Thank you for your interest in." She shut the message without hesitation. There was no point in reading any further. She could already predict the usual phrases like, "We did not select you for further consideration," or "We appreciate the time you took to reach out to us." No acceptance email ever started with a genuine thank you for your interest. Like the absence of soreness after a workout or the stillness before a storm, this sensation was all too familiar to Cynthia. It was that fleeting thrill that vanished as quickly as it came, just as her doctors and mother would say, before the weight of reality set in. Even though she had grown accustomed to it, even though she anticipated it, she felt drained. She closed her eyes, resting her forehead against her hands, both her organic and cybernetic limbs offering comfort in their own unique ways. But the moment was short-lived. She snapped her eyes open at the sound of a voice she recognized all too well. "Cynthia, what a surprise." She shut the message without hesitation. There was no point in reading any further. She could already predict the usual phrases like, "We did not select you for further consideration," or "We appreciate the time you took to reach out to us." No acceptance email ever started with a genuine thank you for your interest. Like the absence of soreness after a workout or the stillness before a storm, this sensation was all too familiar to Cynthia. It was that fleeting thrill that vanished as quickly as it came, just as her doctors and mother would say, before the weight of reality set in. Even though she had grown accustomed to it, even though she anticipated it, she felt drained. She closed her eyes, resting her forehead against her hands, both her organic and cybernetic limbs offering comfort in their own unique ways. But the moment was short-lived. She snapped her eyes open at the sound of a voice she recognized all too well. "Cynthia, what a surprise." Cynthia glanced up at the speaker, her face carefully composed. "Hi, Mom." If her mother sensed the tension in her voice, she chose to ignore it. "Am I interrupting something? Are you busy?" "The very fact that you're here right now suggests that I'm not." "Fantastic." Her mother settled down beside her on the bench with a cheerful thud. Cynthia felt an overwhelming urge to flee, every instinct urging her to escape like a trapped creature. Yet, she understood that her mother was relentless. Evading her now would only postpone the inevitable confrontation, not stop it altogether. She plunged into the conversation with sharp wit. "I'm surprised you're not preoccupied. Did you tire of concocting designer babies in your lab?" Dr. Olivia Havoc was a bioengineer and geneticist, specializing in gene editing during the embryonic phase of human development. Wealthy families seeking extravagant ways to spend their fortunes and elevate their status would hire her to give their unborn children yet another edge in life. Cynthia held strong views about her mother's career, particularly regarding the dangerously thin line between her work and the abhorrent practice of eugenics. A line that seemed to vanish as her mother's clients grew wealthier. Her mother brushed off the remark, offering a rehearsed smile. "Oh, I'm not here to discuss my profession. I'm here to focus on you." "Oh, delightful, your favorite hobby. What's the topic this week? Let me take a wild guess. I bet I can figure it out." "I'm sure you can do it too. You have all the skills needed, just as you should be able to make wise decisions." "I really should, shouldn't I? As your daughter, I should have everything sorted out and perfect by now, right? There's nothing in my genes that you meticulously shaped to hold me back, is there?" Her mother's smile faltered slightly, a small twitch in her face that hinted at hidden hurt. Cynthia felt a sharp pang of pride at being the reason for it. But her mother, much like Cynthia, was adept at gathering her shattered pieces. "Cynthia, regardless of what you think of me, I'm not here to give you a lecture. I've learned my lesson about that. I apologize for how my former student acted. She was meant to be much more discreet during your screening, though subtlety was never her strong point. Anyway, I'm not here to argue with you." "Then what is your purpose here?" Making reparations, one hopes. Her forced grin faded into something unsettlingly genuine, and a chance. A notification flashed on Cynthia's ocular display. Her reaction must have betrayed her, as her mother quickly urged, "Go ahead, check it out. Cynthia widened her eye and concentrated on the alert, activating it with a simulated muscle. She scanned the message, then read it again, and once more to confirm her own sanity. The Conjunction of Planets Research Division is pleased to extend an offer for a permanent sim developer role aboard the orbital station, the mother of invention. Her mother nodded. Dull. I had to maneuver some connections quite forcefully to get your credentials submitted to the station before it reaches orbit next month, ensuring you stood out among the other candidates, of course. And given the station's rather exceptional situation, they were much more inclined to bring you on board. What makes this station stand out, she inquired, already regretting her words. She was so weary of companies that only wanted to use her as a guinea pig for their latest synth cures or prototypes. She had no interest in being anyone's experimental subject. It's a collaborative project involving various member species of the CPRD to ensure that scientists and workers from such diverse evolutionary backgrounds can coexist peacefully. A significant portion of its funding is allocated to, can you take a guess? The medical facilities. Exactly. Cindy, considering the range of sapient species it will accommodate, it won't just rely on medbots, it simply can't. In fact, it needs to be equipped to treat even a sentient cluster of gas particles, so helping a human with an allergy should be a walk in the park. An allergy. You make it sound so trivial when you phrase it that way. From up there, it will seem insignificant. There will be more unusual life forms on that station than in the deepest parts of our oceans. It took me a long time to grasp your perspective, Cindy, but that's why you're so eager to venture out there, isn't it? To escape the questions. To feel less like an outsider. Cynthia had to give her mother credit. She had done her homework and put considerable thought into this. So much so that she was nearly spot on about Cynthia's true desires. You mentioned it's set to reach orbit next month. I know it's short notice, but I only learned about your acceptance recently. And, well, you weren't answering my calls. And how long will it stay in Earth's orbit? Why is that important? Mom, is it actually moving or not? No, they're just trying to encourage collaboration in our industry and bring more ships to Earth. It's a little nudge to draw attention to our isolated system. Cynthia, you can't be serious. What do you mean? I can see it written all over your face. Are you really thinking about turning down this offer? She chuckled in disbelief. Goodness, I know you've always been headstrong, but even you can't be this stubborn. What's wrong with this ideal solution to all your complaints? Not sufficient for you? Seriously. I just want a genuine off-world job, Mom, not something that's just a shuttle ride away. This is a genuine opportunity. I've been incredibly patient with you, but you're really testing my limits. You're a jack of all trades, Cynthia. AI, cloud computing, spatial processing, honestly, you could be managing a website for all I care. But why space? What's so crucial out there that you can't find in your own solar system? US say it already. Cynthia could handle hurting her mother's pride. She could throw an insult without flinching and endure any ridiculous argument her mother clung to. Yet, despite the flaws and tensions in their relationship, even Cynthia doubted she could bring herself to admit that her strongest reason for wanting to leave Earth was sitting right beside her. She settled for a response that was less cutting. Just leave me alone. To her credit, her mother didn't raise her voice. Not in this park, where any outburst could draw unwanted attention. Instead, she let out a heavy sigh and got to her feet. What will it take for you to see that I love you? All I want is for you to be safe. What you're doing frightens me, and I just can't wrap my head around it. She covered her face with one hand, rubbing her temple with the other. Sometimes you make it really difficult to care about you. Cynthia felt the weight of those words, choosing to remain silent as her mother turned away, creating an even greater chasm between them. As Cynthia sank under the burden of her unspoken thoughts and past actions, her gaze drifted to an elderly man seated on a nearby bench. He was rhythmically tapping the side of his cell phone, attempting to summon the age-old remedy of simply hitting it until it responded. With a quick glance through her ocular implant, she gathered details about his device, its model, year, and technical specifications. It was 4 years outdated, a relic from a company that had long ceased its production. The hardware itself was in good shape with proper care. It could easily last another decade. However, longevity wasn't the goal in the cell phone market. It didn't matter if the phone functioned perfectly on its own. If the surrounding ecosystem refused to support it, it was rendered obsolete. Cynthia could detect the insidious code lurking within the phone's latest software updates, a not-so-subtle nudge from the company urging users to upgrade as they gradually sabotaged the device from within. 1. How much time would pass before it was thrown away? How long can an item remain outdated and impractical before it vanishes in the relentless cycle of planned obsolescence? The elderly man sat there, both frustrated and disheartened, as he wrestled with his phone. Cynthia noticed the subtle change in the lines around his eyes, as the stubbornness she had observed in him gradually faded into resignation. She rose from her seat and approached him, using her ocular prosthetic to identify his phone model. "Pardon me, sir." He glanced at her, taken aback, his gaze lingering on her prosthetics. Hello, he squinted, a hint of skepticism in his voice. "Do you need something?" "I have something that could be just what you're looking for." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "If you're looking to get back at those jerks messing with your phone, I know a fantastic local shop that can fix it up for you at a great price. They'll replace the faulty parts and clean up those pesky scam updates." He glanced at her, then shifted his gaze to his son, and for a moment, Cynthia felt a twinge of doubt about her approach. But then he asked, "How much are we talking?" She chuckled. "Way less than buying a new one. And it'll work like it did before. Even better than that." He nodded, relishing the response, before breaking into a youthful grin. "I guess I could take a look at them." As she resumed her jog, she left him with his newfound tools of rebellion. With each stride, she felt the burden of her prosthetics, always slightly unbalanced and misaligned with the rest of her body. It could shift her in one direction or cause her to trip in another. Yet she adapted, modifying her posture to ensure everything worked in harmony. That evening, she intended to search for jobs again, ready to submit her updated resume and recommendation letters. Rejection was likely, perhaps more than once. But in that moment, she was running, feeling the wind rush against her lungs and the heavy implant nestled in her abdomen shift beside her stomach. One of the many intricate parts of her that society seemed eager to render obsolete and abandon. She was determined not to let that happen,